If you've studied wartime home front history long enough, you already know the usual stories about ration books, victory gardens, and the push for national self-sufficiency. But what most people never hear about are the quiet, concealed food sources families relied on when official rations weren't enough. These weren't the obvious garden patches authorities encouraged everyone to grow. These were discreet setups, tucked behind sheds, beneath stairwells, under loft boards, and along forgotten edges of property where no one bothered to look. For many families, these hidden food sources weren't just clever, they were essential. And today they offer real lessons for anyone interested in survival planning, food independence, or simply understanding the resourcefulness of ordinary people during the most pressure-filled years of the 20th century. Before we get into the specifics, let me set the stage for about a minute. Wartime shortages hit at different levels depending on the country, but the pattern was consistent. Official rations satisfied only a portion of daily nutritional needs. The rest had to come from improvisation. People understood that anything grown openly could be subject to inspection, confiscation, or, well, community sharing expectations. Hidden spots, on the other hand, meant control, privacy, and a buffer against uncertainty. Families reused seeds, preserved every scrap of organic matter for soil, and passed down growing knowledge quietly. What survived from these strategies is a blueprint that still works today, especially for anyone trying to build resilience without drawing attention. With that in mind, let's go into the 7 forgotten World War II food sources families grew in hidden spots, and how you can apply the same methods today with practical, workable steps. You know, many families relied on concealed potato mounds because they offered plenty of calories, grew quietly, and, well, they blended into the landscape just perfectly. Potatoes were prime targets for requisition in occupied regions, but families learned to hide their most reliable crop by burying small mounds near woodpiles or at the edge of tree lines. Soil was piled loosely, with straw or dry leaves mixed in to disguise fresh earth. It was a clever bit of ingenuity, honestly. The reason this worked so well was simple. Potatoes require little above-ground visibility. A bit of vine here and there draws no suspicion, really. If you want to apply this today, well, you can actually replicate the method with covered potato trenches behind storage sheds or along fence lines. Just dig a trench, layer some straw, place your seed potatoes, cover them lightly, and then, disguise the disturbed soil by scattering a bit of natural debris. It's honestly one of the best low-signature food systems you can build. Some households quietly maintained rabbit feed gardens to support backyard hutches, often hidden under raised floors or inside alleys. Rabbits were, absolutely invaluable because they reproduced quickly and provided meat without any noise. What most people tend to forget is that the feed often mattered just as much as the animals themselves. Families, they planted clover, chicory, dandelion greens and plantain in corners nobody ever inspected. These feed beds needed almost no maintenance at all and just blended in as simple weeds. The modern application, honestly, is pretty straightforward. Create small, diverse patches of edible greens that double as animal feed. Even if you're not raising rabbits, these greens provide vitamins, can be dried for storage, and, they grow even in poor soils. Hidden mushroom beds were, quite common in basement cellars and those unused corners of bomb shelters. Mushrooms, well, they really did solve those pesky protein gaps without needing any sunlight. Families who understood how to cultivate them became, let's say, highly self-sufficient. Oyster mushrooms were especially popular, primarily because they thrived on waste paper and straw. Families would layer dampened material in crates and, well, they harvested quietly. To use this today, all you need is a controlled, shaded environment, such as a garage or underhouse crawl space. It's quite simple, really. Inoculate straw or cardboard with spawn, maintain moisture, and harvest every couple of weeks. It's discreet, productive, and nearly silent. Quite fascinating, isn't it? Many rural families grew beans along hidden trellises tucked behind barns or camouflaged with existing vegetation. A clever way to keep them out of sight, don't you think? Beans were, really prized for their protein and long-term storage value. By training vines up old fencing or discarded wire frames behind structures, families managed to hide their crops quite effectively. The beauty of beans is that once the vines catch, they require minimal attention, really. The practical application now is to grow pole beans along shaded trellises behind outbuildings or on the backside of compost enclosures. Once dried, the beans store for years. Shade-tolerant herbs became a quiet, nutritional resource, often grown in narrow strips between buildings. Parsley, chives, mint and sorrel grew well in dim environments, and they offered medicinal and culinary value long after ration spices ran out. Because herbs can be harvested repeatedly, families treated them as renewable assets. For modern use, establishing narrow herb corridors along the shaded side of your house gives you year-round access to fresh greens without attracting any attention. Families often maintained secret berry patches beyond the edges of their main property, using brambles as natural camouflage. Blackberries, raspberries and currants were easy to propagate and, honestly, nearly impossible to distinguish from wild growth. They provided vitamins during times when fresh produce was scarce. These days, planting berry canes along neglected fence lines or at the back of a yard gives you low visibility nutrition. They return annually and need almost no intervention, really. One of the most overlooked strategies was small grain patches tucked between taller crops or hidden behind hedges. Rye and oats were especially important because they matured reliably, and families could thresh small amounts by hand without attracting attention. These grains stretched bread rations and provided animal feed. If you want to apply this now, well, you can plant a narrow strip of grain, behind taller crops such as corn or sunflowers. Even just a few square meters, honestly, can yield several pounds of usable grain. These forgotten practices aren't just relics. They're field-tested resilience strategies that, still work. If you're building a modern preparedness plan, studying these hidden methods will give you practical ways to grow meaningful amounts of food quietly and really quite consistently. If you enjoy deep historical knowledge like this and want more guides that break down real World War II survival methods, subscribe to the channel, share this video with fellow history buffs, and help keep this legacy of survival knowledge alive.